The night was quiet. Too quiet. The kind that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. The dim glow of streetlights flickered over the near-empty parking lot of a convenience store on the outskirts of town. A lone woman, no older than her mid-30s, stepped out of the store, a small grocery bag in one hand and her car keys in the other. Her dark brown hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, and her sharp, steady eyes scanned her surroundings as if by habit. She was used to being aware, always alert. Being a single mother had taught her that. Being a Navy SEAL had ingrained it into her very bones. But no one here knew that. To the world, she was just another woman trying to make ends meet, raising her son alone. No one knew about her years of grueling training, the missions she had carried out in the most dangerous corners of the world, or the strength that lay beneath her calm exterior. And tonight, a group of men was about to make the worst mistake of their lives. A low whistle cut through the air, followed by a few chuckles. From the corner of her eye, she noticed them. 4 men, leaning against a rusted old pickup truck, their faces partially hidden under the shadows of their caps. Their clothes were rugged, their stances relaxed but predatory. She knew the type. Arrogant, reckless, dangerous in numbers, but weak when alone. "Hey, sweetheart," one of them called out, stepping forward with a cocky grin. "Need a hand carrying those?" She didn't respond, only tightened her grip on the grocery bag and continued toward her car. It was a response they didn't take kindly to. "Hey, I'm talking to you," another one said, moving into her path. His breath reeked of alcohol, his eyes glinting with something sinister. "Where's your manners, lady?" She stopped, staring at him, her expression unreadable. A lesser woman might have felt fear, might have stumbled over words, pleading to be left alone. But she wasn't a lesser woman. Another one of the men snickered. "What's wrong? Too good to talk to us?" She exhaled slowly. "I don't want trouble." Her voice was steady, calm, but they wanted trouble. The first man reached out, just barely grazing her arm. It was a mistake, a deadly one. In a flash, she moved, her hand snapping up to grip his wrist with a strength that made his breath hitch. Before he could react, she twisted, just enough to send him staggering back with a sharp gasp of pain. The others stiffened, the air shifted. "Oh, you think you're tough, huh?" The tallest of the group, clearly the leader, stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. "You picked the wrong town to act all high and mighty in, lady." She said nothing, only tilted her head, slightly, calculating, measuring. She had faced men like him before, on battlefields, in secret missions, in places so dark, these men couldn't even imagine them. But they had no idea. They thought she was just a single mother. They had no clue they were about to learn the hard way why she was the most feared Navy SEAL in the country. And by the time they realized it, it would be too late. The leader of the group took another step forward, his heavy boots scuffing against the pavement. The air around them thickened, charged with something dangerous, something unpredictable. The woman, still calm, still unshaken, shifted her weight slightly. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but it was the kind of movement that meant she was ready for whatever came next. The man she had grabbed earlier was still rubbing his wrist, his expression a mixture of confusion and anger. He wasn't used to being handled like that, especially not by someone he thought was weak. The leader gave him a side glance before returning his focus to her. "You got a real attitude problem," he muttered, his voice lower now, more controlled. "You think you're better than us?" She didn't answer. Instead, she held his gaze, unflinching. The silence stretched between them, growing heavier with every passing second. The other men shifted uncomfortably. They had started this expecting an easy target, someone they could intimidate, maybe even toy with for a while. But now, something about her made them hesitate. She could see it in their eyes, the flicker of doubt, the unspoken question of whether they had just made a mistake. The leader scoffed, shaking his head. "You ain't from around here, are you?" She, tilted her head slightly. Does it matter? He chuckled, but there was no humor in it. Yeah, it does. See, in this town, we don't take kindly to people who act like they own the place. And we sure don't like people who think they're too good to show a little respect. She knew exactly what he was trying to do. She had seen this kind of power play before, in different forms, in different places. It didn't matter if it was a street in a small town or an enemy compound overseas. Men like him operated the same way. They used intimidation as their weapon, relying on numbers, on fear. But fear had no effect on her. A breeze rolled through the parking lot, rustling the edges of her jacket. She remained still, controlled. Inside, her mind was working fast, analyzing every movement, every breath, every slight shift in weight. She could tell which of them were the real threats and which ones were just following along, caught up in the moment. The leader stepped even closer, his jaw tightening. I'm gonna give you one last chance, he said, his voice lowering. Apologize. Be polite. Maybe we'll forget this little attitude of yours. She let out a slow breath. I don't want any trouble, she repeated, her voice steady. He smirked. Too late. His hand shot forward. Fast. Aggressive. But not fast enough. Before his fingers could even graze her, she moved. It was instinct, pure muscle memory, a reaction honed through years of training. In one fluid motion, she sidestepped, her arm deflecting his outstretched hand while her other hand shot up, pressing firmly against his chest. With barely any force, she shifted his momentum, sending him stumbling off balance. It happened so fast that the others didn't even react right away. The leader caught himself, regaining his footing almost instantly. But the brief moment of imbalance was enough to infuriate him. His face twisted in anger, his hands balling into fists. The men around him tensed, their hesitation replaced by something else. They weren't backing down. She knew this wasn't over. A flicker of movement caught her attention from the side. One of the other men shifting his stance, preparing to step in. She turned slightly, keeping them all in her line of sight. You made a big mistake, lady. The leader growled, his body tense with barely contained rage. She didn't respond. There was no point. She had already made up her mind. If they took another step, if they made another move, she would end this before they even realized what had happened. But something stopped her. A sound. A voice. Mom? Her entire body stiffened, her breath catching for just a fraction of a second. She turned her head slightly, just enough to see him. Standing a few feet away, near the entrance of the store, was her son. He was small, barely 8 years old, his dark eyes wide with confusion and something else. Concern. He clutched a small toy in his hands, one she had bought him just minutes ago inside the store. Her stomach tightened. He wasn't supposed to see this. The leader's eyes flickered toward the boy, and something in his expression shifted. A slow, knowing smile crept onto his face. Oh, he muttered, his tone mocking. You got a kid? She forced herself to stay calm, to keep her voice steady. Go back inside, sweetheart, she said, without taking her eyes off the men in front of her. Her son hesitated, his small fingers tightening around the toy. But now, something in her tone made him stop. He swallowed, then slowly backed toward the store entrance. The leader chuckled. That's real cute, he said. Single mom, huh? That must be tough. She didn't respond, but inside, something was shifting. The situation had just changed. Before, she was only focused on neutralizing a threat. Now, it was about protecting her son. And that meant ending this before it escalated. The leader took another step closer, tilting his head. Tell you what, he said, his voice dripping with false kindness. Since you got a kid and all, I'll be nice. Walk away now. But next time you see us, you be a little more respectful. He thought he had the upper hand. He thought bringing up her son made her vulnerable. He had no idea. Her expression remained unreadable, but inside, something cold settled in her chest. This wasn't over. Not yet. And when it was, they would never forget the night they crossed the wrong woman. She didn't move right away. The night air felt heavier now, thick with tension. The leader of the group was still smirking, but there was something in his eyes. Something sharp, calculating. He thought he had won. He thought she would back down because her son was watching. But he was wrong. She kept her breathing steady. Her hands relaxed at her sides. But inside, her mind was racing. She had seen this kind of behavior before, in places far more dangerous than a parking lot in a quiet town. Men like him didn't stop. They tested boundaries, looking for weakness, for hesitation. And if they thought they had power over you, they would keep pushing. The leader gave her one last smirk, then turned to his crew. "Let's go," he muttered, jerking his head toward the truck. The others hesitated for a moment before following. She could hear their footsteps, the sound of car doors opening and closing, the truck's engine rumbling to life. But she didn't turn her back to them, not until the vehicle pulled out of the lot, tires crunching against the pavement as it disappeared down the road. Only then did she let out a slow breath. Her son was still standing near the store entrance, his small face scrunched with worry. She walked over to him, crouching down so they were eye level. "You okay, sweetheart?" she asked softly. He nodded but didn't say anything right away. Then, after a pause, he asked, "Who were those guys?" She hesitated. She didn't want to scare him, but she also didn't want to lie. "Just some people who were being rude," she said finally. "But it's over now." He frowned, glancing toward the road, where the truck had disappeared. "Are they gonna come back?" She reached out, tucking a loose strand of hair behind his ear. "Don't worry about that," she murmured. "Let's get home." They walked to the car together, and as she buckled him into his seat, she could feel his eyes on her. He had questions, she could tell. But he didn't ask them. Not yet. The drive home was quiet. The town passed by in a blur of dimly lit streets and darkened houses. She had only lived here for a year, moving to get a fresh start, to give her son a life away from the chaos she had known. She thought a small town would be peaceful, safe. But she should have known better. She had spent years in places where danger lurked in the shadows, where survival depended on instinct and skill. And even though she had left that life behind, she could still feel it in her bones. That readiness, that awareness. Tonight had been a warning, and she wasn't the kind of woman who ignored warnings. When they pulled into the driveway, she glanced at the house, modest but cozy, the porch light casting a warm glow over the front steps. "Go on inside, buddy," she said, offering her son a small smile. "I'll be right behind you." He hesitated for just a second, then nodded and climbed out of the car. Hurrying toward the front door, she watched him go, waiting until he was safely inside before she turned and scanned the street. It was quiet. Too quiet. Her instincts prickled. She had learned long ago to trust that feeling. Taking a slow breath, she turned back toward the car, pretending to check her bag. But really, she was listening, watching. Then, just for a split second, she caught it. Movement at the far end of the street. A car parked just out of range of the streetlights. Someone was inside, watching. She straightened, her face unreadable. She didn't react, didn't let them know she had noticed. Instead, she closed the car door and walked inside, locking the doctor behind her. But inside, her mind was already working. She wasn't just a single mother. She wasn't just a woman who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was a Navy SEAL. And if they thought she was someone to mess with, they had no idea what was coming. She pulled the curtains closed, her heart steady, her breathing calm. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot.